blood dries darker than mud on the hem of a cotton dress. But in the Bitterroot Valley of 1,885, nobody looked close enough to tell the difference. Everyone knew the story of the Holloway Ranch, a grieving widow doing her best to raise a stepdaughter who had lost her mind. That was the lie Matilda Holloway fed to the church congregation every Sunday. But the bruises on Callie's arms weren't from madness, and the screams heard from the cellar weren't from night terrors. The town turned a blind eye, until a drifter named Beau Medet rode past the gate, a man who knew that the most dangerous snakes in Montana didn't rattle before they struck. This isn't a fairy tale. This is what really happened. The winter the snow turned red. The wind in the Montana Territory didn't just blow. It hunted. It sought out the cracks in the timber walls of the Holloway homestead and whistled through them like a dying breath. For 21-year-old Callie Holloway, the wind was the only thing allowed to touch her. Callie knelt on the rough-hewn floorboards of the kitchen, her hands raw and red, scrubbing a stain out of a heavy velvet curtain. The water in the bucket was freezing, skimmed with ice, but she wasn't allowed to waste firewood on heating water for cleaning. That was Matilda's rule. One of hundreds. "You missed a spot, girl," a voice clipped from the doorway. Callie didn't flinch. She had learned long ago that flinching only invited a faster strike. She kept her eyes on the soapy water, watching the gray bubbles pop. "Yes, ma'am. I'll get it out." Matilda Holloway walked into the room. She was a striking woman, even at 42, with hair the color of polished coal and a posture so rigid it looked painful. She wore a dress of dark purple silk imported from Street, Louis that rustled like dry leaves as she moved. She was the picture of the grieving, pious widow, the woman who had nursed Callie's father, Tobias Holloway, on his deathbed 2 years ago. Only Callie knew that Matilda had been the one to mix the medicine that stopped his heart. "Stop scrubbing," Matilda ordered, tapping her cane against Callie's shoulder. It wasn't a gentle tap. It was a warning. "Judge Thaddeus Moore is coming for dinner tonight to discuss the property tax assessment. You are not to be seen." Callie sat back on her heels, wiping her hands on her apron. "But the cooking, Matilda, I have hired Mrs. Gable from town to handle the roast." "You are too erratic, Callie. You know how you get." Matilda leaned down, her voice dropping to a faux sympathetic whisper that chilled Callie's blood more than the water. "We wouldn't want the judge to see you having one of your episodes. It would break his heart to see Tobias's daughter so far gone." Callie looked up, her blue eyes hard. "I am not mad, Matilda, and I know the deed to this ranch is in my name. Daddy told me." Crack. The cane struck Callie across the cheekbone. It wasn't a heavy blow, just enough to split the skin and shock the senses. Callie gasped, clutching her face. "Your father," Matilda hissed, her mask of civility vanishing, "was a delirious old fool who died owing more money than this dirt is worth. You exist here because of my charity. You eat because I allow it, and you breathe because I haven't found a reason to stop you yet." Matilda straightened her dress, checking her reflection in the window pane. "Go to the cellar. Stay there until the judge leaves. If I hear a single sound, if you so much as cough, you will spend the night in the barn with the horses, without a coat." Callie scrambled to her feet. Fighting back was a fantasy she indulged in only when she was asleep. Awake, survival meant obedience. She walked to the heavy oak door that led to the root cellar. "And Callie?" Matilda called out just as Callie reached the handle. Callie paused. "Yes, leave the locket." Callie's hand flew to her throat. The small silver oval was the only thing she had left of her birth mother. It contained a tintype picture and a lock of hair. "Matilda, please. It's all I have. It's silver. It clashes with your rags. Put it on the table." Trembling, Callie unclasped the chain. She placed the metal onto the wood table. It made a small, lonely sound. As she descended into the darkness of the cellar, smelling the damp earth and the rotting potatoes, Callie heard the lock click from the outside. She sat on an overturned crate, listening to the muffled sounds of the house above. She heard the carriage arrive. She heard the booming, jovial voice of Judge Thaddeus Moore, a good man, a man who had known her father. "Matilda, my dear, you look radiant," the judge's voice filtered down through the floorboards. "And how is poor Callie?" Callie stood up, ready to scream, to pound on the ceiling, to tell him everything. "Oh, Thaddeus." Matilda's voice drifted down, thick with staged sorrow. "It's been a hard week. She's violently confused. I've had to confine her to a room for her own safety. She thinks the walls are speaking to her again." "Tragic," the judge murmured. "Truly tragic. You are a saint to bear it, Matilda." Callie sank back onto the crate, tears cutting tracks through the dust on her face. This was her life. A slow erasure. She was a ghost in her own home, haunting the floorboards, while the woman who killed her father drank his wine. But the wind was changing outside. A storm was coming, and it was bringing something other than snow. 2 days later, the sky was the color of a bruised plum. Beau Medette pulled the collar of his sheepskin coat up against the biting chill. His horse, a sturdy roan gelding named Sarge, snorted, his breath pluming in the air. Beau was a man built of sharp angles and slow movements. He wore a low-slung gun belt that had seen better days, and his hat was pulled low, hiding eyes that were constantly scanning the horizon. He wasn't looking for trouble. He was looking for a paycheck. But in Beau's experience, the two were usually married. He reined in at the front gate of the Holloway Ranch. It was a sprawling place, good timber, decent grazing land. But the fences were leaning, and the main barn needed a new roof. It looked like a place that was bleeding out. Slowly, he saw a woman on the porch. Matilda Holloway. She was watching him through a pair of opera glasses, even though he was only 50 yards away. Beau rode up to the porch steps and tipped his hat. "Ma'am." Matilda lowered the glasses. She looked him over with the eye of a livestock trader. She saw the worn boots, the travel dust, the gun. "We don't buy from peddlers, and we don't feed beggars." "Not begging," Beau said. His voice a low rumble, like gravel shifting. "Looking for work. I'm a hand. Can fix fences, break horses, run cattle. I have hands," Matilda said dismissively. "2 of them. Jenkins and Cole. I saw 'em down by the creek," Beau lied smoothly. "Sleeping under a willow tree. Looked like they were on a long break." Matilda's lips thinned. Jenkins and Cole were cheap drunks she had hired because they were easy to manipulate, not because they were hard workers. "And what do you charge?" "Room, board, and $10 a month." It was a starvation wage. Any decent cowboy would ask for 30. Matilda's eyes narrowed. "Why so cheap? I got nowhere to be, and I like the quiet," Beau said. It was half true. The other half was that he was running from a past in Kansas that involved a dead card shark and a misunderstanding about an ace of spades. He needed to lay low. "The bunk house is full," Matilda lied. She didn't want a stranger near the other men, talking. "You can sleep in the loft of the barn, but if I catch you stealing so much as an egg, I'll have Sheriff Dalton hang you before breakfast." "Deal," Beau said. He spent the rest of the day fixing the corral gate. He worked with his shirt off despite the cold, his muscles moving with the rhythm of a man used to hard labor. He could feel eyes on him from the main house. It wasn't until dusk that he saw her. He was at the water pump near the kitchen garden, washing the grime off his neck. The back door of the house creaked open, and a young woman stepped out carrying a heavy basket of wet laundry. It was Callie. She looked thin, her dress hanging off her frame like it was 2 sizes too big. Her hair was pulled back in a severe bun, but stray strands of gold fell around a face that held a haunting, fragile beauty. But it was the bruise on her cheekbone, fresh and purple, that caught Beau's eye. She didn't see him at first. She struggled with the basket, her boots slipping in the mud. The basket tipped, and wet sheets spilled onto the dirty ground. "No, no, no," she whimpered, dropping to her knees, frantically trying to gather the white linen before the mud set in. She looked terrified, her eyes darting toward the house. Beau shut off the pump and walked over. His boots made no sound in the soft earth. He reached down and grabbed a sheet just as she did. Their hands brushed. Hers were freezing. His were burning hot from the work. Callie gasped and jerked back, looking up at him as if he were a wolf. "Please, I'll clean it. Don't tell her. Please don't tell her." Bo paused, holding the muddy sheet. He looked at the fear in her eyes. It wasn't the fear of a woman who was mad, as the town gossip claimed. It was the fear of a beaten dog. "I ain't gonna tell nobody nothing, miss," Bo said softly. He gathered the sheets up, shaking off the worst of the mud. "Accidents happen. She won't see it that way," Callie whispered, her voice trembling. "She says I'm clumsy. She says I ruin everything I touch. She says a lot, does she?" Bo asked, handing the sheets back to her. He looked directly into her eyes. "Who gave you that shiner?" Callie flinched, pulling her collar up. "I fell. I have spells. Dizzy spells." "That's a strange way to fall," Bo noted dryly. "Usually the ground doesn't leave the shape of a walking cane." Callie went still, the air between them charged with sudden electricity. Nobody had ever challenged the narrative before. Nobody had ever looked at her, rather than through her. "Who are you?" she breathed. "Bo Medette. I'm the new help. You should go," Callie said, a desperate urgency entering her voice. She stepped closer, lowering her voice so only he could hear. "You should get on your horse and ride until this valley is a memory. This house, it eats people, Mr. Medette." "I've got a thick hide," Bo said, offering a small, crooked smile. "Callie," Matilda's voice cut through the air like a whip crack from the kitchen window. "Who are you talking to?" Callie jumped, her face draining of color. "Nobody, Matilda. Just the wind." She looked at Bo one last time, a look of pleading and warning combined before turning and running back into the house, the heavy basket banging against her hip. Bo watched the door close. He took a pouch of tobacco from his pocket and rolled a cigarette, his eyes fixed on the kitchen window where he could see Matilda's silhouette. He struck a match on his boot heel, the flame illuminating the hard set of his jaw. He had planned to stay a month, make his $10, and move on to Wyoming. But Bo Medette had a weakness for broken things. And he had a feeling that the mad girl with the terrified eyes was the only sane person on the Holloway Ranch. He took a drag of the cigarette and exhaled a cloud of gray smoke. "Reckon I'm staying for the winter," he muttered to the darkening sky. Winter clamped down on the Bitterroot Valley like a steel trap. By mid-December, 3 feet of snow blanketed the Holloway Ranch, isolating it from the town of Hamilton. The silence was profound, broken only by the howling wind and the rhythmic thud of Bo Medette's axe-splitting firewood. 3 weeks had passed since Bo arrived. He had kept his head down, doing the work of 3 men, earning his $10 and his place in the hayloft. But his eyes were always moving, always watching. He watched Matilda Holloway preside over her small kingdom with venomous precision. He watched the 2 hired hands, Jenkins and Cole, sneak whiskey into the bunkhouse and shirk their duties, knowing Matilda wouldn't fire them as long as they remained loyal spies for her. And he watched Callie. He saw the way she flinched at loud noises. He saw the tremors in her hands in the mornings. He heard her weeping, sometimes late at night when the wind died down. Sounds that drifted from the attic room where she was quartered, like an unwanted piece of furniture. Most disturbing were the spells. Twice a week, usually in the evenings, Callie would change. Her eyes would glaze over. Her speech would become slurred and nonsensical, and she would wander the house touching walls, whispering to people who weren't there. On those nights, Matilda would lock her in the cellar or the attic, loudly lamenting her stepdaughter's burdensome madness to anyone who would listen. Bo didn't buy it. He'd seen madness before in soldiers broken by the war, in prospectors who'd spent too long alone in the desert. Callie's madness didn't look like that. It looked like something else. It looked man-made. One Tuesday evening, the opportunity presented itself. Matilda had ordered Jenkins to hitch up the sleigh to take her into town for a church meeting, despite the weather. She left Cole in charge, which meant Cole was asleep by the potbelly stove in the bunkhouse within 20 minutes, with a half-empty bottle of rye on his chest. Bo waited until the sleigh's bells faded into the distance. He slipped out of the barn, the snow crunching loudly under his boots in the frozen air. He approached the back of the main house. The kitchen was warm and smelled of stale coffee and lye soap. Callie was sitting at the small kitchen table, staring blankly at a bowl of cold stew. She looked up dreamily as Bo entered. Her pupils dilated so wide her blue eyes looked almost black. "Did you hear the music, Mr. Madette?" she mumbled, smiling faintly at a corner of the ceiling. "Daddy is playing the fiddle again." Bo's heart hammered against his ribs. The tone of her voice, it was thick, unnatural. He walked to her, crouching so they were eye level. "Callie, look at me." She blinked slowly, struggling to focus. "You shouldn't be here. Matilda says the help belongs outside." "Callie, what did you eat tonight?" "Before the stew?" She frowned, a line of confused concentration appearing between her brows. Just my tonic. Matilda gives it to me for my nerves. Before supper. It tastes like licorice and old pennies." "Tonic." Bo stood up, his jaw tight. He moved to the large oak sideboard where Matilda kept her medicinals. There were various bottles, liver pills, cough syrups, but tucked in the back, behind a jar of pickled eggs, was a dark blue glass bottle with no label. He uncorked it. The smell hit him instantly. It was cloying and sweet, underneath which lay a metallic, bitter tang. He recognized it from his time in Dodge City, in the opium dens where men went to forget their names. Laudanum. But it wasn't pure. There was something else mixed in. Something earthy and foul. He dipped a finger in and touched it to his tongue. His mouth instantly went numb, followed by a wave of dizziness that passed quickly. Jimson weed. A powerful hallucinogen that grew wild in these parts. Matilda wasn't just sedating Callie. She was actively poisoning her mind, keeping her in a state of chemical-induced psychosis. Every time Callie started to think clearly, Matilda would dose her with the tonic to shove her back into the fog. Rage, hot and blinding, flooded Bo's chest. He gripped the edge of the sideboard until his knuckles turned white. This wasn't just cruelty. This was a slow-motion murder. He capped the bottle and put it back exactly where he found it. He turned to Callie, who was now humming a discordant tune, tracing patterns in the spilled salt on the table. He had to get her out. But where? The passes were snowed in. If they ran now, they'd freeze to death before they reached the next town, and Matilda had the law on her side. Sheriff Dalton was a regular dinner guest who firmly believed the narrative of the saintly widow and the mad daughter. If Bo tried to take her, he'd be hanged for kidnapping a mentally incompetent woman. No, he needed proof. He needed to know why Matilda was going to such lengths to keep Callie docile and discredited. He walked back to Callie and gently placed a hand on her shoulder. She flinched violently, spilling the salt. "It's all right," he soothed, his voice low. "It's just me, Callie." "Bo." She looked up at him, a moment of terrifying clarity breaking through the drugs in her system. "She's inside my head, Bo. She put spiders in my head." "No, she didn't, darlin'. It's just the medicine." He leaned in close. "Listen to me. You have to stop taking it. You have to pretend to take it and spit it out. Can you do that?" Tears welled in her massive dark eyes. "I don't know. I get so confused. You have to try. Your life depends on it. I'm going to help you, Callie, but I need you clear-headed." He heard the jingle of sleigh bells outside. Matilda was back early. The meeting must have been canceled due to the snow. "Remember," Bo whispered urgently, squeezing her shoulder before pulling away. "Spit it out." He slipped out the back door just as Matilda breezed in the front, shaking snow from her furs, demanding to know why Callie hadn't finished her dinner. Bo stood outside in the freezing dark, listening to Matilda berate the drugged girl. He looked down at his hands. They were steady now. He wasn't just a drifter looking for a paycheck anymore. He was a man with a mission. He was going to break Matilda Holloway, whatever the cost. 4 days passed. 4 days of Bo watching Callie like a hawk, giving her subtle nods when Matilda approached with the blue bottle. It was working, barely. Callie was good at hiding it. She would take the spoon, hold the bitter liquid under her tongue, and then pretend to cough into her handkerchief, spitting the poison into the cloth. The withdrawal was brutal. Without the constant sedation, Callie was anxious, her hands shaking uncontrollably, her emotions raw. Matilda mistook this for worsening madness and threatened to double the dose, which made the charade even harder to maintain. But the fog was lifting. On Saturday afternoon, Matilda left with Jenkins to inspect a herd of cattle on the far south pasture that had been stranded by a drift. Cole was again asleep in the bunkhouse. Bo found Callie in the parlor. She was standing before a portrait of her late father, Tobias Holloway, a stern-looking man with mutton-chop whiskers and kind eyes. She looked around when Bo entered. Her eyes were clear, bluer than the winter sky, but filled with a dawning, horrific realization. "It's real, isn't it?" she whispered. "The fog. I woke up this morning and I remembered. I remembered her mixing it. I remembered her smiling when I fell down the stairs last month because I couldn't feel my feet. It's real, Callie. She's been dosing you with laudanum and Jimson weed." Callie pressed her hands to her temples, a sob catching in her throat. "Why? Why would she do this? I've done nothing but try to please her since Daddy died. That's what we need to find out. Where did your father keep his important papers?" Callie hesitated. "His study, but Matilda keeps it locked. She says it's too painful for her to go in there." "Show me." They went to the heavy mahogany door at the end of the hall. Bo didn't bother with finesse. He pulled a stiff piece of wire from his pocket, something he'd picked up in the barn, and worked the lock. It clicked open in seconds. The study smelled of stale cigar smoke and dust. It was exactly as Tobias had left it 2 years ago. Papers were stacked on the massive roll-top desk. Matilda said Daddy died broke. Callie murmured, walking into the room like it was a shrine. That he gambled everything away and mortgaged the ranch to the hilt. She said her inheritance from her first husband is the only thing keeping us afloat. Bo started rifling through the desk drawers. "Never trust the word of a snake about the location of the poison, Callie." The drawers contained old cattle manifests, seed receipts, standard ranch business. Nothing incriminating. "Think, Callie. Did your father have a hiding place? A safe?" Callie closed her eyes, trying to push past the lingering haze of the drugs. He used to show me magic tricks when I was little. In here, he made a coin disappear into the desk." She moved to the side of the heavy oak desk. There was decorative carving along the legs, vines and acorns. Callie ran her trembling fingers over a specific acorn carved near the top right drawer. She pushed it. A sharp click echoed in the quiet room. A false bottom in the deepest drawer popped up an inch. Bo pulled the drawer out and lifted the false bottom. Underneath lay a leather portfolio tied with a black ribbon. His heart thumping, Bo untied the ribbon and spread the papers on the desk. It was Tobias Holloway's last will and testament, dated only a month before his death. Bo read it quickly, his frown deepening with every line. "What does it say?" Callie asked, her voice barely audible. Bo looked up, his eyes hard as flint. "It says Matilda is a liar. The ranch isn't broke. Your father had extensive holdings in silver mines in Nevada. They're paying out huge dividends monthly." Callie gasped. "But we live like paupers. Matilda says we can barely afford flour. She's hoarding it," Bo said disgustedly. He continued reading. "And here's the kicker. The entire estate, the ranch, the mines, everything was left to you, Callie." He turned the page. "However, there's a stewardship clause. Until you turn 25, or marry a respectable man of good standing, Matilda is appointed as executor and steward of the estate." He pointed to the final paragraph, the ink dark and damning. "Should my daughter, Callie, be afflicted by any permanent malady of the mind that renders her incapable of managing her affairs, stewardship shall revert permanently to my wife, Matilda Holloway, with full control over all assets." The silence in the room was suffocating. The truth hung in the air between them, ugly and undeniable. She's making me crazy," Callie whispered, horror dawning on her face as the pieces clicked together. "To keep the money. If I'm mad, she gets everything forever. And if you're sane," Bo said grimly, "she's just a guest in your house until you come of age or find a husband." Callie grabbed the desk for support, her knees buckling. The years of abuse, the gaslighting, the cold cellar, the drugs, it wasn't hated. It was business. Cold, calculating business. We have to take this to Judge Moore, Callie said, clutching the will to her chest. We can't, Bo cut in. Not yet. The judge is her friend. If we show him this, Matilda will claim it's a forgery, or that you stole it in a fit of madness. She has the whole town convinced you're insane. We need more proof. We need to prove she's poisoning you. Suddenly, the floorboards in the hallway creaked. Bo spun around, his hand instinctively going to the Colt Navy revolver at his hip. Matilda Holloway stood in the doorway of the study. She wasn't wearing her outdoor furs. She hadn't gone to the south pasture. It had been a ruse. Her face was a mask of icy fury. She looked from Callie, clutching the papers, to Bo, standing by the open secret compartment. Get away from my husband's desk, Matilda said, her voice deadly quiet. It's not his desk anymore, Matilda, Bo said, stepping in front of Callie. And it's not your ranch. Matilda laughed, a brittle, sharp sound. She reached into the pocket of her dress and pulled out a small, pearl-handled Derringer pistol. She pointed it directly at Bo's chest. You were a mistake, Mr. Madette. I should have hired another drunk like Jenkins. You're too clever for your own good. And you're sloppy, Matilda. Jimson weed? That's a messy way to handle things. It worked for 2 years, she snapped. Her eyes flicked to Callie. Give me the papers, you stupid girl. Before you hurt yourself. Callie stepped out from behind Bo. She was shaking, terrified. But her chin was up. For the first time in years, she looked her stepmother in the eye. No, Callie said, her voice shaking but clear. It's mine. He left it to me. Matilda cocked the hammer of the Derringer. The click was loud in the small room. I won't ask again. You are having an episode, Callie. You are violent and confused, and you are threatening me with that letter opener on the desk. I have no choice but to defend myself. She was setting the stage. Even now, she was writing the lie. Bo calculated the distance. 10 feet. Too far to grab the gun before she pulled the trigger. You shoot me, Matilda, and you got a dead body to explain, Bo said, keeping his voice even. Sheriff Dalton might be your friend, but 2 dead drifters in 2 years on the same ranch? People talk. Matilda smiled, cold and humorless. It's winter, Mr. Madette. People freeze to death all the time. They get lost in blizzards. Sometimes they just disappear. The tension stretched thin. Bo knew she meant it. She had killed her husband to get control. Killing a drifter to keep it was nothing to her. All right, Bo said, raising his hand slowly in surrender. You win. Calm down. He looked back at Callie. Give her the papers, Callie. It ain't worth dying over. Callie looked at him, betrayed. Bo, give them to her. He put a specific emphasis on the words, his eyes locking with hers, trying to convey a message without speaking it. Live to fight another day. Trembling, Callie walked forward and held out the leather portfolio. Matilda snatched it with her free hand, never lowering the gun. Wise choice, Matilda sneered. She backed out of the room, keeping the gun trained on them. Now, both of you, to the cellar. Until I decide what to do with this mess. She marched them to the kitchen and forced them down into the cold darkness of the root cellar, locking the heavy door behind them. Plunged into blackness, Callie collapsed onto a potato sack, sobbing. We lost. She has the will. She knows we know. She's going to kill us. Bo sat beside her in the dark, the smell of earth and damp filling his nose. He reached out and found her hand in the blackness, squeezing it hard. We haven't lost, Callie, he whispered fierce in the dark. She made a mistake. She didn't shoot us. She will, Callie cried. No, Bo said. She's scared now. She's reactive. And I saw something in that desk she didn't know I saw. What? A ledger, tucked right at the back. It had dates and amounts from those silver mines. And it had the judge's name next to half the payments. Callie gasped. Judge Moore is helping her? Looks like Matilda bought herself some justice. Which means we can't trust the law in this town. Bo stood up in the darkness, feeling the rough timber of the ceiling beams above him. We're on our own, Callie. And tonight, we're breaking out of this hellhole. If it's a war she wants, it's a war she's gonna get. The darkness in the root cellar was absolute, save for the thin sliver of moonlight bleeding through the cracks in the storm doors above. But it wasn't the cold that woke Bo from his doze an hour later. It was the smell. Wood smoke. Thick, acrid, and getting stronger. "Callie," Bo hissed, shaking her shoulder. "Wake up," Callie gasped, coming out of a fitful sleep. "What? Is it morning?" "No." "Smell that?" Callie sniffed the air, and panic instantly seized her chest. "Smoke. Is the house on fire?" Bo moved to the wooden steps, pressing his hand against the slanted cellar doors. They were warm. Too warm. "She's not burning the house," Bo said, his voice grim. "She piled hay or brush against the cellar doors and lit it. She's smoking us out. Or cooking us. It was a crude, brutal tactic. If the fire didn't kill them, the carbon monoxide would. It was the way you cleared a badger from its den. We're going to die." Callie choked out, coughing as the first tendrils of gray smoke began to curl down through the slats. "She's really doing it. She's killing us. Not tonight," Bo growled. He scanned the cramped space. Potato sacks, crates of apples, a rusted plowshare, and there, in the corner, obscured by cobwebs, a coal chute. It was a narrow iron hatch, used to slide coal into the basement for the furnace, which hadn't been used in years since Tobias died. "Callie, grab that shovel," Bo ordered, pointing to a rusted spade leaning against the wall. "When I get this hatch open, I need you to climb. Don't look back. Just climb." Bo grabbed a heavy iron crowbar from the tool rack. He jammed it into the rusted seam of the coal chute. He grunted, the veins in his neck bulging as he put his entire weight into the leverage. The metal groaned. Rust flaked off in showers of orange dust. Above them, the crackle of the fire grew louder. The heat was radiating through the wood now. The air in the cellar was turning gray and hazy. Callie was coughing violently, her eyes streaming. "Come on, you stubborn son of a," Bo roared, giving one final, desperate heave. Bang! The latch snapped. The iron door swung inward, revealing a shaft of cold, fresh night air. "Go!" Bo shouted, grabbing Callie by the waist and hoisting her up. She scrambled into the narrow, soot-covered chute, clawing her way up the brickwork until she tumbled out onto the snowy ground outside the house. Bo followed seconds later, his chest heaving, his face streaked with coal dust and sweat. They lay in the snow for a moment, gulping down the freezing air. The cellar doors, 10 feet away, were engulfed in flames. A pile of oil-soaked rags and hay had been stacked against them. "She didn't want it to look like an accident," Bo whispered, staring at the fire. "She wanted to be sure." "The barn," Callie rasped, pointing. Lights were on in the barn. They could hear men's voices. Jenkins and Cole. "We need horses," Bo said. "And we need them now." He pulled Callie to her feet. "Can you ride?" "I grew up in a saddle," she said, wiping soot from her face. The fear was gone, replaced by a cold, hard anger that matched the winter night. They kept low, moving through the shadows of the outbuildings. The wind howled, masking the sound of their boots in the crunching snow. They reached the side door of the barn. Bo peeked through a knot in the wood. Jenkins was sitting on a tack trunk, polishing a rifle. Cole was nowhere to be seen, likely watching the front of the house to make sure nobody escaped the cellar fire. Bo looked at Callie. "Stay here. Count to 10. Then open the door." "What are you going to do?" "I'm going to have a chat with Jenkins." Bo slipped around to the main doors. He pushed one open just enough to slip through. Jenkins looked up, startled. "Who goes there?" "Just a ghost," Bo said, stepping into the lantern light. Jenkins' eyes went wide. He scrambled to bring the rifle up, but he was slow and drunk. Bo crossed the distance in 3 long strides. He didn't go for his gun. He used his fist. A solid right hook connected with Jenkins's jaw, sending the man sprawling back into a pile of hay, unconscious before he hit the ground. "Callie, now!" Bo signaled. Callie burst in through the side door. She ran to the stalls. "Sarge knows me," she said, unlatching Beau's roan. She moved to the next stall, and Bess hurts if you pull the bit too hard. They worked in perfect, frantic unison, throwing saddles onto the horses. Beau tightened the cinch on Sarge just as the barn door creaked open again. Matilda stood there. She wasn't wearing her furs this time. She was wrapped in a heavy wool shawl, the derringer in her hand. Her face was twisted in a rictus of shock and fury. "You," she hissed. "You're supposed to be burning. Hell didn't want me yet." "Matilda," Beau said, swinging into the saddle. He reached down and grabbed the reins of Callie's horse. "Get down," Matilda screamed, raising the pistol. Callie, mounted on Bess, looked down at her stepmother. For years, this woman had been a giant, a monster, a god. Now, standing in the straw with a shaking hand and a tiny gun, she looked small. "No," Callie said. Matilda fired. The shot went wild, burying itself in the barn wall as Sarge reared up, startled by the noise. "Go!" Beau yelled, kicking his horse into a gallop. They thundered out of the barn, snow kicking up in massive clods behind them. Matilda screamed for Cole, but her voice was lost in the wind. They didn't look back. They rode hard, cutting across the frozen pasture, jumping the split-rail fence, and disappearing into the tree line of the Bitterroot National Forest. Behind them, the fire at the cellar doors caught the edge of the porch. The flames began to lick at the white paint of the house. Hungry and growing, they rode until the horses were blown and trembling, deep into the timber where the snow was waist-deep and the wind couldn't reach them. Beau found a shallow cave under a limestone overhang, a hunter's blind he'd spotted weeks ago while checking fence lines. It wasn't much, but it was out of the wind. He built a small fire using dry moss and deadwood, keeping it small to minimize the smoke. Callie sat near the flames, wrapped in a horse blanket, shivering violently. It wasn't just the cold, it was the adrenaline crash. "Here," Beau said, handing her his canteen. "Water. Drink." Callie took it, her hands shaking so hard the water sloshed out. Beau reached out and steadied her hands with his own. "We made it," he said softly. "For how long?" Callie asked, her voice hollow. "Matilda will go to town. She'll tell Sheriff Dalton you kidnapped me. She'll say I'm insane and you're a predator. They'll form a posse, Beau. They'll hang you." Beau sat back, feeding a twig into the fire. The flames cast dancing shadows on his rugged face. "Let 'em come. I've been chased by better men than Dalton. Who are you?" "Really?" Callie asked. She studied him, the scars on his knuckles, the way he sat with his back to the wall, watching the entrance. "You aren't just a drifter. Drifters don't break out of burning cellars and disable armed men without blinking." Beau was silent for a long time. He pulled his tobacco pouch out, but put it back without rolling a cigarette. "My name is Beau." "That part's true," he said finally. "But I wasn't always a ranch hand. I used to ride for the brand in Texas. Texas Rangers." Callie's eyes widened. "You're a lawman?" "Was," Beau corrected. "I turned in my badge 3 years ago. There was a situation, a rich cattle baron, a corrupt judge, and a young boy who got caught in the middle. I did what I thought was right. The law disagreed. I spent a year in a hole in Yuma before I escaped. I've been running ever since." He looked at her, his eyes vulnerable for the first time. "I know what it's like, Callie, to be powerless against people who own the paper and the ink. That's why I couldn't leave you there." Callie reached out and touched his arm. "You stayed for me? I reckoned you were worth the trouble," he murmured. The moment hung between them, fragile and warm in the freezing night. Beau leaned in, just an inch, but stopped himself. He stood up abruptly, checking his revolver. "Get some sleep. We move at first light." The morning brought a sky the color of iron and a silence that was deafening. They rode north, aiming for the pass that would take them toward Missoula. The plan was simple. Get to the U.S. Marshal's office. A federal marshal wouldn't care about Judge Moore's local influence, but the snow was too deep. By noon, the horses were floundering, sinking to their chests in drifts. "We can't cross the pass," Bo yelled over the wind. "It's suicide. We'll freeze before we reach the summit." "We can't go back," Callie cried. "We aren't going back to the ranch," Bo said, scanning the horizon. "We're going to Wolf Creek. There's a mining camp there. It's rough, but they have a telegraph line." They turned east, navigating the treacherous slopes. 2 hours later, a crack echoed through the valley. Ping! A spray of snow erupted from the bark of a pine tree inches from Callie's head. "Down!" Bo roared, tackling Callie off her horse just as a second shot whizzed past. They tumbled into a snowbank behind a fallen log. Bo scrambled up, peering over the wood. Far below them, at the edge of the clearing, were 4 riders. "It's the sheriff," Bo said, squinting. "And Jenkins. And 2 deputies. They found us," Callie whispered, terror gripping her again. "They're tracking the horses. The snow makes it easy." Bo checked his Colt. 6 rounds. He had a Winchester rifle in the saddle scabbard, but the horse Sarge had bolted 10 yards away when the shooting started. "Stay down," Bo commanded. He crawled through the snow, moving toward the rifle. Another shot rang out, kicking up snow near his boot. They had the high ground, but the sheriff had rifles with long-range scopes. "Madette," the voice echoed up from the valley floor. It was Sheriff Dalton. "Give up the girl. We know you have her. Judge Moore has signed a warrant for your arrest for kidnapping and attempted murder." "He's lying," Callie screamed, her voice cracking. "I went willingly. Don't waste your breath, Callie," Bo yelled back. "They can't hear the truth over the sound of Matilda's money." Bo reached the horse, grabbed the Winchester, and rolled back to the log. He levered a round into the chamber. "I can hold them off for a bit," Bo said, his breath coming in short bursts. "But once they flank us, we're done." He looked at Callie. Her face was pale, her lips blue from the cold. She looked terrified, but she wasn't breaking. The madness Matilda had cultivated was gone, burned away by the fire of survival. "Can you shoot?" Bo asked. "My father taught me," Callie said. "A long time ago." Bo handed her the revolver. 6 shots. Don't use them unless they get within 20 feet. If they get that close. He didn't finish the sentence. They both knew what it meant. "Bo," Callie said, gripping the heavy gun. "Look." She pointed not down the valley, but up. On the ridgeline above them, silhouetted against the gray sky, was a solitary figure on horseback. He wasn't wearing a sheriff's badge. He was wearing a long duster coat and a wide-brimmed black hat. He sat motionless, watching the firefight below. "Who is that?" Callie asked. Bo squinted. The figure raised a hand. Suddenly, the riders below stopped firing. They turned their horses, looking up at the ridge. The man on the ridge slowly drew a rifle from a scabbard. It was a Sharp's buffalo rifle, a weapon that could take a man's head off from a mile away. He didn't aim at Bo. He aimed at the sheriff's posse. Boom. The sound was like a cannon shot. The snow exploded at the feet of the sheriff's horse. The horse reared, throwing Dalton into a drift. The man on the ridge racked the lever and fired again. Boom. This time, he hit a tree branch directly above Jenkins, sending a heavy load of snow crashing down on him. "He's pinning them down," Bo realized. "He's helping us." "Why?" Callie asked. "I don't know," Bo said, grabbing the reins of the horses which had wandered back. "But I'm not waiting to ask. Mount up." With the mysterious rifleman providing covering fire, the sheriff's men were forced to scramble for cover. Bo and Callie vaulted onto their horses and scrambled up the steep embankment, away from the posse and toward the ridge. As they reached the crest, the man in the black hat turned his horse to face them. He was old, his face a map of deep lines and gray stubble. One of his eyes was covered by a black patch. "You ride sloppy, Madette," the old man rasped. His voice sounded like grinding stones. Bo pulled Sarge to a halt, staring at the man. Recognition slowly dawned on his face. "Silas?" Bo breathed. "I thought you were dead. I thought they hung you in Abilene." "Rope broke," the old man grunted. He spat a stream of tobacco juice into the snow. He looked at Callie, then back at Bo. "You got a habit of picking up strays, boy. That's what got you in trouble in Texas." "Callie, this is Silas Pike," Bo said, a strange mix of relief and wariness in his voice. He's an old associate. Associate? Silas cackled. I taught him how to shoot and how to run. Looks like you need a refresher on both. Silas gestured with his chin toward the north. Sheriff will regroup. He's got fresh horses. You two look like you're running on fumes. My camp is 2 miles up. I got venison and I got dynamite. Pick your poison. Bo looked at Callie. We can trust him, mostly. Callie looked at the one-eyed outlaw, then back at the valley where her stepmother's lies were hunting them down. Lead the way, Mr. Pike, Callie said. As they rode deeper into the mountains, the snow began to fall harder, erasing their tracks. But Callie knew the real storm was yet to come. Matilda wouldn't stop. The judge wouldn't stop. But now, they had a ghost on their side. The storm held them at Pike's cliffside cabin for 2 days. Huddled over a map, Bo argued for escape to the border, but Callie shook her head. She was done running. Matilda is selling the ranch tomorrow, Callie said, holstering her father's revolver. I'm going back to take what's mine. At noon on Sunday, the Hamilton Town Hall was packed. Matilda, dressed in black lace, wept fake tears at the podium. To pay my late husband's debts, I must sell the estate to the Montana Silver Combine. Judge Moore banged his gavel. Sold. Crash. The double doors flew open. Beau Medette stood in the frame, flanked by the terrifying one-eyed Pike holding a massive Sharps rifle. Between them walked Callie, not a madwoman, but a queen returning from exile. I object, Callie announced, walking down the aisle. The crowd parted in stunned silence. She's escaped, Matilda shrieked, clutching the podium. Sheriff, arrest them, they're dangerous. Nobody moves, Pike growled, racking the slide of his rifle. Beau marched forward and slammed the blue poison bottle and the stolen ledger onto the judge's table. We found the poison in your kitchen, Matilda. And the bribes in Tobias's ledger. Judge, $500 for your silence the week Tobias died. The room erupted. The townsfolk saw the truth in the judge's pale face. Matilda saw her victory crumbling. Desperate, she snatched a heavy revolver from the sheriff's holster. If I can't have it, nobody can, she screamed, aiming at Callie. Beau threw himself in front of the girl just as the gun roared. He hit the floor, blood blooming on his shoulder. Matilda cocked the hammer again, eyes manic, but she was too slow. Callie drew her father's gun with a speed born of survival and fired. One clean shot. Matilda fell back, the black lace on her chest turning red. She was dead before she hit the floor. Spring arrived early in the Bitterroot Valley. The snow melted, revealing wildflowers and fresh grass. The Holloway Ranch was alive with the sound of hammers. The nightmare was over. Judge Moore was rotting in a territorial prison cell, and the ranch officially belonged to Callie. On the porch, Beau tested his healing shoulder. He watched the clouds drift over the mountains. Well, winter's over, he said as Callie joined him. Reckon I should move on. Callie took his hand, her fingers warm and strong. The cows need moving to the upper pasture, she said softly. I don't need a ranch hand, Beau. I need a partner. He looked at the woman who had saved him, seeing his future in her eyes. I reckon I can stay, he whispered. He leaned down and kissed her, a slow, steady promise that the running was finally over. And that, ladies and gentlemen, is the legend of the Holloway Ranch. It's a stark reminder that in the Wild West, the most dangerous predators weren't always wolves or bears sometimes. They were the people smiling at you from across the dinner table. Matilda Holloway thought she could erase Callie, but she forgot one thing. Pressure makes diamonds, and fire forges steel. What do you think? Did Judge Moore get off too easy with prison, and would you have forgiven the town for turning a blind eye for so long? Let me know your verdict in the comments below. I read every single one. If you enjoyed this story of justice, romance, and grit, please smash that like button. It really helps the channel grow. And if you haven't already, hit subscribe and ring the bell so you never miss a story from the frontier. Thanks for listening, and I'll see you at the next campfire.